everybody. I'm Mary Garton. I'm here on behalf of Citizens Climate Lobby, which is also a grassroots organization. We're focused on major climate change, and our priority right now is changing the price of fossil fuels. Whoops. So fossil fuels are much cheaper than they ought to be because fossil fuel companies don't pay anything to fix all of these problems that they cause. We are paying the higher insurance, the property damage for new infrastructure. We're paying the price of political instability, etc. Fossil fuel prices should reflect these $62 billion of implied subsidies every year, but they don't. Now, if we add a fee onto fossil fuels, then clean, non-polluting energy comes out cheaper. This drives the economy-wide transition to renewables, especially when the price continues to increase and we price fossil fuels out of the market. CCL supports carbon dividends to do this, to accelerate the solutions to climate change. We support the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, among others, but that's the one I'm going to talk about, and I'll go over what it does. A carbon dividend plan has two parts: putting a price on carbon and then giving that money to American citizens. The carbon fee is the part that rapidly reduces emissions, and the dividend is what protects average Americans from higher prices. So first, I want to talk about carbon pricing. We charge the fossil fuel companies a fee on oil, gas, and coal at the fossil fuel extraction point, which means high up at the well, the mine, or the first point of sale. To explain why the fees are collected so far upstream, the EPA shows us that carbon emissions occur all throughout the economy. And a simple gasoline tax, for example, would only target 29% of emissions. Now, you want to assess the fees where the fossil fuels first hit the economy upstream so that the electrical grid, industrial energy, and the natural gas that heats our buildings all get reduced, all at the same time. And it's easy to collect these fees upstream because there are fewer places. We don't need to hire a huge staff of people and build a bureaucracy to test emissions on every smokestack and tailpipe. And because all sectors of the economy are downstream from the fee, all of these emissions are covered. Now, the fee starts low so it doesn't shock the economy. We've seen with COVID how the economy suffers after a major sudden change. So there needs to be time to adjust. So the fee starts low and increases steadily every year. This predictable increase allows industries and investors to see what's on the horizon and calculate how quickly fuel prices are going to rise so that they can plan how they're going to reduce costs before that fee becomes substantial. And here's the key: reducing energy costs also reduces emissions. So the cost of fossil fuels tells industries and businesses to reduce their energy use because it will keep going up. But the decisions about how to do that are made by everybody. And that's why economists favor a carbon fee as the fastest and most efficient approach. All sectors of the economy move to cleaner energy all at the same time. That means 210 million Americans making millions of big or really small money-saving decisions every day that cut fossil fuel use. Now, this approach releases everyone's creativity to look for ways to reduce energy costs. So there's incentive for innovators to reduce energy in appliances, homes, transportation in many and various varied ways. And there's incentive for consumers to seek out these innovations. So I know we hear breakthroughs in the news almost every day. I've heard about better solar panels, better wind turbines with a different shape, biofuels from algae, magnetic refrigerators, 5-minute electric car charging, and so many more great ideas are out there. But then they aren't heard from again because there's no incentive for investors to support these technologies and get them to market. A carbon price would change that. So Columbia University Center on Global Energy Policy studied the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, and they concluded that implementing EICDA as a stand-alone policy leads to emissions reductions of 36 to 38% by 2030. Most of the near-term reductions occur in the power sector, where emissions fall precipitously, and coal is nearly eliminated by 2030. Local air quality, especially in neighborhoods near power plants, is improved, with NOx declining by 75% and SOx and mercury declining by 95%. Now that's fast, which is really important because the sooner air quality improves, the more lives in these frontline communities will be saved from illness and death that is caused by air pollution. Now I'd like to show you a few scenarios from an MIT and collaborators modeling tool called En-ROADS. It's been used in briefings for US members of Congress, universities, local governments, businesses, the State Department, Chinese government, and the UN Secretary General's office. This shows business as usual today. Now for simplicity, just focus on the orange square. Right now, we're looking at a temperature increase of 3.6 degrees by 2100. The goal is 1.5 degrees, so this is bad. Now this graph shows our ongoing increase in emissions. This curve needs to bend down steeply. Now let's look at policies that phase out coal, oil, and gas and increase renewables. We get to 3 degrees, which is better, but it's not enough. So let's add high incentives for pedestrian, bicycle, and public transport and increase car, truck, shipping, air travel, train, and bus efficiency, and highly incentivize the purchases of electric vehicles. And then we improve the energy efficiency and electrification for buildings. With all of that, we get to 2.5 degrees, which is on the right track, but it's not enough. However, if we go back to business as usual and only install a steadily rising carbon fee like the EICDA, which is what this model, this graph was based on, we do get the same result. With a carbon tax on board, though, if we on top of that add energy efficiency, electrification incentives, and infrastructure for vehicles, buildings, and industry, we lower emissions even more. We're at 2.2 instead of 2.5. Now the model tells us we need to save forests, plant trees, and add some carbon capture to meet that target of 1.5 degrees. So here's what worries me. If we try to do all of these things separately and piecemeal, using only regulations and incentives without a carbon price, that is a lot of legislation in a lot of different sectors to get passed in a very divided Congress. And all of that takes time to pass and time to implement. The Clean Power Plan, which while it was the best we could do in a divided Congress, it was signed in 2015. But the first enforceable carbon limits weren't scheduled to kick in until 2022, which is next year, which was 7 years later than it was signed because of the administration needed to be put in place to make it work. And it wasn't scheduled to ramp up to full effect until 2030, which is 15 years after it was signed. Then it turns out this plan never started because a polar opposite administration came into power and killed it before it even began. So with our time window shrinking, we need to think strategically about speed. A carbon price, and in fact this one, doesn't require much administration, so it's written to go into effect no later than 9 months after it gets passed. It will start having an effect immediately. Now it's clear we need many solutions in play at the same time. But the single most effective first step is an economy-wide carbon price. Now this graph shows what happened during the brief period Australia had a carbon tax. In 9 months, emissions went down. Unfortunately, they didn't have a dividend, and that undermined support. The new government replaced the carbon price with incentives called the Emissions Reduction Fund. It took a long time to even begin to flatten this curve, and emissions are way higher now after they dropped the carbon price. So business popularity. Because carbon pricing offers predictability instead of uncertainty, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Business Roundtable call for carbon pricing, which is huge news. Support from business is essential to getting legislation passed. There are a number of conservative organizations who call themselves the eco-right, who support carbon pricing. If we leverage these businesses and conservative citizen groups with Republicans in Congress, we have a good chance of getting meaningful legislation passed, getting started sooner, and hopefully not having policy get overturned immediately with the next administration. Now, on the Democratic side, the U.S. Senate Democrats Committee on the Climate Crisis and the U.S. House Committee on Climate Crisis both said we need to include a carbon price as a tool in our climate action. The IPCC, that group of scientists who gave us the 1.5-degree goal that we all accept, they described carbon price as a necessary condition of ambitious climate policy. Now, most of you may be familiar with Project Drawdown. Over 100 solutions to climate change are presented with detailed information about the degree of benefit from each one. The idea is that there are many, many things we have to do to get to a livable world. And the author of Drawdown spoke to us in 2017, and we asked why carbon pricing wasn't listed as a solution in the book. And his response was, because carbon pricing isn't a solution. Wind and solar and building efficiency are solutions. Carbon pricing is a policy that makes it easier and faster to get those solutions in place. Now here is Project Drawdown founder and author Paul Hawken in Aspen saying much the same thing.
There is no single policy that would have the greatest impact, the greater effect than pricing carbon. There's no question about it. There is not a single solution there except for the education of girls in the carbon then that would not be empowered and accelerated by carbon pricing. That's what CCL really does. I love your focus.
Okay, so the Green Revolution. There is fear among many Americans, rightly so, that they won't be able to afford a transition to clean energy. That's why the dividend is so important. In a carbon dividends plan, 100% of those fees is sent out to households as a monthly dividend, a check they can spend any way they want. It comes every month. Now, to explain how this is progressive, this graph compares carbon footprints of people with progressively higher incomes. On average, the higher someone's income, the higher the CO2 emissions and the pollution they're responsible for. On average, wealthier people travel more, have bigger houses, buy more stuff, and when equal dividends are returned to people, those who pollute less than average, which is these folks, will not only be protected from increased costs, they'll end up getting back extra cash. Now, I do need to point out that no matter how we reduce emissions, whether with a carbon tax or with a series of other policies, we will all see a cost. The energy revolution will not be free. A carbon tax is obvious about causing some cost increases, and that worries some people. But in fact, all policies will cost. We need to be on the lookout always for unintended consequences of any policies that end up causing vulnerable people to shoulder extra costs they can't afford and shouldn't have to afford. So let's talk about costs. 85% of those steadily rising fuel costs get passed on to consumers, who see some things getting more expensive. On the left, we have the lowest income families, and the highest incomers are there on the right. Costs that will go up for people are gas and electricity, costs of high carbon purchases, and especially investments like stock portfolios and CDs. Wealthier people who, on average, buy more stuff and have more investments in fossil fuels are responsible for the most emissions. So their costs go up substantially more than lower income folks. Okay, so this is how much average households will pay the first year in additional costs for all that stuff. Now, here are the dividends you get back. They do look like different amounts, but they started as equal rebates. Because they're required to be taxed, poorer folks keep more of it. Anyway, households in the bottom 20% do very well. They get much more cash back than their costs increase. This extra cash serves as an economic stimulus for local neighborhoods. Now, the second and third quintiles also come out with extra cash. Even the fourth quintile just about breaks even. Now, that means the cost of this transition is not going to fall on the shoulders of those who can least afford it. It's those big energy users on the top who on average end up behind. But that's only as a consequence of too many greenhouse gases. Anybody who pollutes very little will see only a small rise. The costs are a direct consequence of purchasing choices. Financial Financial investors will need to divest stock and retirement portfolios from fossil fuels, which right now are artificially appealing. We have all demanded our universities to divest, but actually everybody needs to. Now this graph shows only the first year. Every year the carbon fee rises, and some costs rise, and dividends also rise. Once the fee reaches $50, the average household would get $2,500 as a dividend. The benefits are far beyond monetary, though, because many benefits can't be monetized, as you know, the value of stopping climate change, the value of immediately improved air quality near power plants and in smoggy cities. In the largest public statement of economists in history, 3,550 economists, every chair of the Federal Reserve from Obama's back to the Carter administrations, Nobel laureate economists, and these others signed a statement saying that a steadily increasing tax is the most cost-effective lever to reduce carbon emissions at the scale and speed that is necessary. All of the revenue should be returned directly to U.S. citizens through equal lump sum rebates. The majority of American families, including the most vulnerable, will benefit financially. I should also note that former Democratic candidates Pete Buttigieg and Andrew Yang also argue for this, as does the father of climate awareness, James Hansen, and Michael Mann, who first published the hockey stick graph. Now, we need to throw everything at this problem. We need CAFE standards, the Clean Air Act, bans on fracking, a stop to natural gas infrastructure, assistance to mining communities, research and development, assistance with transmission lines, and more. But we also need to have carbon dividends at the ground level as the most rapid and effective first step we can take. So if you're curious to know more, or you'd like to work with us, or just know more, the Ann Arbor chapter has a monthly Zoom drop-in session where you can chat with volunteers, ask questions, and the next one is April 22nd. Thank you all so much for letting me have your time and for supporting the effort to stop climate change.